Hi, I'm Alex Howard, and welcome to Conscious 2. My guest in the studio today is Terry Patten. Hi, Terry.
Hey.
And Terry is senior writer, or was senior writer, on the book Integral Life Practice, and is on the faculty of Meridian University, and is also founder of the blog and teleseminar series Beyond Awakening, where he's talked to many of the leading teachers of our time. And in today's interview, we are going to explore integral spiritual practice. So, Terry, maybe a good starting point is, what is integral spiritual practice?
Well, people hear it and it sounds like something maybe they could take up. Should I take up an integral life practice or an integral spiritual practice or an integral transformative practice? And I don't really see it as something that you can take up. In fact, as you go through life, you begin to discover that life is a school, that the challenges that you encounter and that you don't really learn from show up again in a new form. And in fact, life keeps giving you the same lessons again and again and again and again and again and again
Until you get them.
until you really learn them. And when you kind of figure that out and you become really you go a little quiet and humble and curious, and it mobilizes a deeper level of your energies and resources and intelligence. And if you're paying attention, you notice that, that doesn't just have to do with my communications and my relationships. It doesn't just have to do with my way I use my attention. It doesn't just have to do with my relationship to diet and drugs, sex, and rock and roll. It doesn't just have to do with whatever area of life that the first lessons have cropped up in. It's actually got to do with all of life. It's got to do with the deepest levels of your being. It's got to do with the most superficial levels of your being. The school is everywhere you look. It's every breath you take. It's every casual moment where you kind of switch off and you think it doesn't matter, and somehow it does matter, In fact, what you realize is that there's a saying in neuroscience, neurons that fire together wire together, which basically means that whatever's going on in your attention and in your brain gets stronger. So you're actually always practicing something, and you're actually making yourself more like however you're being all the time.
One of the things that it's made me chuckle at myself a number of times over the years is doing, for example, something that feels terribly mundane or tedious or frustrating, and go, oh God, I wish I was doing something like, I wish I was using this time to my meditation, something that was valuable or useful. And it's, like I'm washing the dishes or something, and it's
right.
like, but of course, that has the potential to
be
its own practice.
That's right. Doing the laundry is a meditation.
Right.
In fact, finding your way from the formulaic dead relationship to the ordinary moments of life is one of the biggest lessons that we learn in the life of practice. So that's the way I think of it. It's really just kind of getting the point that all of life is a practice and that it matters, and then noticing that there are these different dimensions of ourselves, different spheres of our lives. Our mind, our body, our deep psychological material, the kind of stuff we might deal with, call shadow or soul work or emotional work. There's the different levels of spiritual practice that spiritual practice is something you do when you meditate or when you pray or when you gather with people and go deep. And something sacred takes place. But in some ways that spiritual practice also can pervade all of life too. But those different areas of life are not just different areas. There's actually a principle we call integral cross-training, wherein the person who begins meditating and disciplining their attention will progress faster if they're also taking on a physical practice. If the person who begins a a particular course of meditation and takes up an intensive program at the gym at the same time is likely to get better at meditation faster than the guy who doesn't, which is sort of counterintuitive because working out at the gym has nothing to do with meditating. Why would that be? And I'm not sure that we really know all the reasons, but it does seem that when you're breaking up a kind of stuckness in one area of life, the organism becomes more creative. Instead of having this kind of attitude of settling into the homeostatic groove of the known and the familiar, there's an activation of potential in which you're curious, you're alive, you're improvising, you're opening. And that's not something you just do with your attention or your mind or even emotionally. You have to do it bodily. You have to do it in your relationships. You have to do it at work. You have to do it with the people that you're most intimate with and most close to, the people that are most difficult for you. It's a 360.
Yeah, and yet it seems to me that often what can happen is someone that their focus to practice is they're a meditator, or they're someone that goes to the gym, or they're someone that goes to therapy, and it seems
True.
rare that people have that 360 perspective to understand that each of those pieces actually has something to offer. And on one hand, it's such a simple idea, but it's actually quite a revolutionary concept in a sense.
I think that it's really proven itself as important, but it doesn't mean that you can't be an athlete and specialize in your sport, your event, or a musician and do a lot of practicing of the cello and maybe comparatively a short amount of time on the meditation cushion or at the gym. We all are unique, and it's perfectly fine for you to have your preferences. And as I teach it, there's an art to this because you have to modify your practices. It's not a matter of having a strict program. And really at the end, it's not about the practices at all. It is about life being practice.
Yes.
Because this, day and age that we're living in is one in which all the spiritual traditions of the world have converged, and they've converged in a scientific time. And there's a conversation going on among people who've devoted their lives for decades in a very intense way to Zen, to Vajrayana, or Dzogchen, various streams of Tibetan practice and Zen practice and Theravadan practice and different Hindu practices of different traditions, Kashmir Shaivites, Advaita Vedantic practitioners, yogis of various types, Sufis, Kabbalistic esoteric practice, Taoist and Chinese martial arts practitioners, shamanic practitioners, and they're all in dialogue with one another in the context of many of the practitioners being pretty smart and being very well read and being scientifically sophisticated, knowing something about modern psychology, knowing something about neurobiology, knowing something about the ways in which we've begun to reverse engineer our nervous systems and understand something about the principles through which even just the principles of adult learning, for example. So that the ferment of that conversation is, I think, among some circles of practitioners beginning to produce some areas of consensus. And the consensus produces some orienting generalizations about how to practice most efficiently, how to do the thing that you're doing anyway because you realize that life is a school and that every moment is a practice and you're always doing something and you're creating your future and you want to be a friend to your future self. You want to be emphasizing the ways of being that are going to make you more and more the person you want to be, the man of the dreams of the woman of your dreams, or the friend of the dreams of the friend of your dreams, or the team member of the dreams of the team of your dreams. Like to become the person that you intuit you can be. Life's always about self-cultivation.
Yeah.
And we're at choice points, every moment has a kind of fork in the road. Where do you place your attention? How do you place your attention? What attitude?
And I guess that's part of my next question, because there's part of what I think happens is people, they almost have an identity sometimes of the practice they do or the way they live their life. And, you know, I think it was very interesting, I don't know exactly when it was, maybe 10, 15 years ago, where I think led by Ken Wilber in the integral community, because I think he had a personal interest in strength training, that suddenly there was all these people that were meditating, starting lifting weights. And it was totally like a paradigm shift in a sense.
Yeah.
And it really, that's just my question is, what helps move people out of what can be a helpful pattern that becomes a rut? Like you were saying, there's a fork in the road. That I think often people aren't aware there's that moment of choice because they keep doing what they do. Like they're a meditator or they're a person that, what helps move people out of that?
Well, one of the things is to hang out with people who are growing. We tend to reify the whole matter instead of realizing that life is performance art and that you are going to have to show up in a new moment every moment. Every you know, this moment is gone now. Now it's a new moment, and how do I show up in that new moment? And that sense of there being a constant evolution of our way of being draws us into a different kind of community with other practitioners. So one of the things that I am most inspired by are the communities of practice that I've been able to convene, in which integral practitioners become friends who, instead of having in common the things they already are, they have in common a process of becoming in which they are always, in a sense, transcending who they have been. And it's that willingness to let go and open up and transcend that is what they have in common. And that questioning of oneself, you know, one of the ways we define the work in this mind sphere or mind module of integral practice is that it's about taking and releasing perspectives and taking perspectives on your perspectives. So when you're in a rut, you're stuck in a particular perspective. And so this process of taking and relaxing, releasing, flexibly moving among, taking a perspective upon your perspectives, this liberates you from tending to get into a rut, and yet you still always have to show up. Everything I can teach people becomes something that they can remember. And when you remember it, it kind of functions a little bit like a fixed thing, like a formula. But practice is never formulaic. It always involves you showing up, becoming conscious enough, and bringing to the moment what the moment requires. Sometimes it requires effort and determination, sometimes it requires commitment, but other times it requires letting go and humor. It requires humility, it requires courage, it requires an open heart that can just love. It requires a sense of humor about yourself. It requires an ability to have self-compassion or to let your heart be touched by another person. Every moment's different. And if you come into it with the idea, oh, I'll practice in the moment, I'll be in my heart, well, that'll be a formula. And you won't really be in the real heart. It'll be the heart you remember.
Yeah.
And the living heart, the heart of this moment, it's always surprising.
You know, there's so much you're saying that directions I'd be curious to go, but I want to come back to this piece around the life practice element of integral life practice or spiritual practice, and also what you were just saying around being, in a sense, being awake to the potential of every moment. And it really strikes me, what you were just saying, that often people have some kind of peak experience or some kind of opening that happens in their practice. And years can then go into trying to recreate that moment or trying to get back to that place. What do you see that supports using life as a practice and really being open to that kind of never-ending unfoldment?
Well, you know, people start in very different places, and there are different things that people have to overcome in order to wake up to that. I know that you cross certain thresholds. When you have a mind-blowing experience where you do have a big opening and your consciousness has been expanded, even by a drug, and you want to regain that experience, if you can understand that experience as a glimpse of a bigger reality that needs to be cultivated through a life of committed practice. Not something that you can have a quick fix and obtain in an enlightenment week or weekend seminar or through a drug or even something that you're going to isolate in your meditation cushion. When you get that essentially life being performance art is, these are permanent lifestyle commitments. So I don't really recommend that people take on a severe program of practice because it's not likely to be sustainable. It's these little incremental adaptations.
But that I resonate with what you're saying. What's interesting is that certainly in the Western world, we have sensationalist media, we have TV shows of people having instant fame and success, and there's always that thing of people trying to get somewhere, and the kind of the efforting into doing that, which just totally loses what's here now, and that's such an addiction.
And it's I teach an attitude toward oneself that I really bring the moment of our contemplation of death forward as a way of evoking this. If you knew you were going to die in a short amount of time, for me, if I go really deep with it, it brings up two different qualities that seem very different, but they're both rooted in that rock bottom reality. One of them is incredible tenderness. Like I forgive everyone, myself. I soften completely, like the exquisite beauty and tenderness and fragility of life is just right there. The other thing is, I have no time for nonsense. I'm serious in a whole different level. And I call the tenderness a kind of feminine self-compassion, and that toughness that cuts through masculine self-compassion. And they're not alternatives to one another. They're two facets of a single self-compassion.
Yeah.
And so I orient toward an attitude in which we're going to outgrow that kind of drivenness, because that drivenness, it reflects a fundamental alienation, which you don't feel already connected to the well-being of existence. You don't feel connected to God or spirit or suchness or the mystery of existence. You don't feel already fundamentally okay. You feel like you've got to achieve it. You're fundamentally not okay. And out of that, everything you do is a reinforcement of the presumption that there's a problem. Right. And so you're always chasing the carrot and dodging the stick and really not in a good place. And many lives are spent almost perpetually reinforcing that fundamental sense of dis-ease. So that kind of seeking will continue to arise in the life of a practitioner. When you notice it happening, we might, having this insight, you might say, oh, I've screwed up again, try to kind of catch yourself and correct yourself as if unfriendly to that misunderstanding in oneself. But if you've really internalized this feminine self-compassion, you can get to a place where, like a good parent to the child that is that part of yourself, you just soften and just kind of, it's work to transform that fundamental presumption. That's okay. Yeah. There's a kind of tenderness with oneself. But there's also then a recognition that it's important to shift. Yeah. And there's maybe an openness and a humility and a curiosity about what it would be like. Maybe I can trust life. Maybe I can trust who I am. Maybe it's not like I'm tending to feel. Well, what would that be like? Can I try that on for size? What would it be like to attempt to bring excellence to what I do from a place of already being, already sufficiency? Yeah. That's a different thing. And really, the spiritual view of the scientific age is radical prior unity. E equals mc squared, which means that every pixel on the screen that anybody is looking at, seeing our images as we do this interview is light, but the satin, the apparently solid chairs that we're sitting in, that's a whole heck of a lot of petrified light. It's speed of light squared times light, every bit of matter.
Yeah.
And the space between us is not different from time. Yeah. Like the mind-blowing radical unity that is the story of the Big Bang, which we're looking back through the Hubble telescope at. The scientific view is profoundly mystical.
Yeah.
And that radical oneness is something we can live from and live into. And we can let the inherently self-correcting, inherently healthy nature of that reality express itself through us.
And what you're saying is it's very beautiful, and in a sense, I feel a transmission. In a sense, the way you're describing it, it's very beautiful. Coming back to a practical piece of it, what for someone that's watching this that says it all sounds great, clearly, Terry, you've got this, this perspective. What helps somebody come there? Because that kind of what I would call a radical self-acceptance, in a sense, it's not an easy place for someone to come to when they feel tormented by themselves and their life and the world around them. What supports that?
So many things. And in an individual's case, it can be many different things. Mm. Sometimes we really have to earn our own self-respect through concrete actions that we take. And that process of building that by finding realistic, right-sized changes of behavior and clearly making commitments to them and reinforcing them, and then when you slip from them, reasserting them, and finally getting to the place where we've actually changed.
I don't think I've ever heard a teacher say that before. I really like what you just said, having to earn your own self-respect. Mm. That there's so much that is written and said around accepting yourself where you are, and of course that's the feminine place of what you were saying, the masculine and feminine. I really appreciate what you just said there around actually sometimes we have to earn that too.
Mm-hmm. It's the nature of the integral approach is sometimes summarized as the difference between either or thinking and both and thinking. And it's of course not just thinking, it's feeling. And it represents a softened and expanded relationship to experience ourselves and other people, in which we really do deeply get to appreciate that there are all these enduring, deep polarities.
Right.
Individuality and communion and connection, self-responsibility, and really being able to reach out and ask for a hand and knowing in some way that we don't exist as an island.
And of course the fundamental of the absolute and the relative, which is, the big joke of it all, in a sense.
Well, exactly. The absolute, is the relative. The relative is the way the absolute is appearing in any given moment. And, I think that cultivating more than anything else a willingness to open into wonder at the mystery of existence is the thing that I bring forward, and that isn't really different from gratitude. That when I am awake to what's really going on here, what's really going on in any given moment is really amazing. Even if I think I've seen it before, even if it's the same old kitchen table and cabinet, and, even I'm staring at this, if it's a gray, drizzly, bleak-seeming day, or even if I just spilled my dinner, even in those moments, the protoplasm contracts. I don't care how enlightened you are. If you begin to sit down in a chair, and unbeknownst to you, somebody pulls it out from behind you, and you fall on your ass, there's going to be a moment of contraction.
No shit.
Exactly. And we've got to have a compassion for our humanity that allows our spiritual intuition, our mystical intuition of the profundity of life and nature to be exalted and complete, even if it doesn't make us immune to the bumps on life's road. Because it's gonna be bumpy.
Yeah.
You know, life's only promise to us is impermanence. The only thing we know for sure is that nobody gets out of here alive.
Yeah.
And essentially everything you love will be taken from you.
Yeah.
And our happiness has to become radical,
Yeah.
where it's not trying to win the game of life. There is no way to win the game of life. There is only a way to be true. You know, what happens as I grow is that I become more and more interested, not in, what's going to promote my initiative, or what's going to bring listeners to my show, or what's going to, kind of advance the ambition motives that you clearly have to pay some attention to in order to be effective in the 3D world. But I realize that I'm being drawn to the people I need to reach through non-ordinary means.
Yeah.
In fact, some of them are going to find their way to me without knowing how,
Yeah.
because that's what's,
Yeah.
So I'm really interested in finding what's really true. Where's the center of the bullseye?
Yeah.
And the deeper you go, it's like if you were, these amazing things like the Power of 10 that zoom way in on the subatomic level. What looked like the center of the bullseye from 50 yards is wide by a mile when you get down to the subatomic level. And so life's always a matter of course correcting and noticing at a deeper level, does that feel right? Does that feel true?
We're out of time. I'm frustrated by the clock because there's so much here that I'd like to go into, but it's what you.
Oh my goodness! Yeah, we are.
Yeah. So look, thank you so much, Terry, for your time.
Thank you.
If people want to go further into integral life practice, Terry's book, which we're senior writer on, but also Beyond Awakening is a great resource. People, if they want to learn more.
BeyondAwakeningSeries.com.
Yeah, BeyondAwakeningSeries.com. Great. Thank you, Terry. Thank you for watching, and look forward to talking with you again, hopefully very soon. Bye-bye.